On the 11th of October 2025, disgraced Lostprophets singer Ian Watkins was found murdered in his prison cell, where he was serving a 29-year jail sentence for CSA. Two other inmates, aged 23 and 39, themselves also guilty of horrific crimes and serving long prison sentences, have since been arrested and remain under police investigation. Watkins' death brings a deserved ending to a monster of unimaginable evil, a man who abused his position as a famous and talented musician to recruit a network of fawning fans in an almost cult-like fashion, many of whom had young children and would willingly allow Watkins access to abuse these children and would even participate in the heinous acts themselves at his behest. Join me today as I uncover Watkins' entire history, from his early years as an aspiring musician, his rise to fame with the Lostprophets, his sickening network of depravity that went unchecked for so long due to the complete failures by the authorities, to his eventual downfall, imprisonment and death. This is a story of drug abuse, fame, depravity, police incompetence, and at the centre of it all, one of the most dangerous and despicable sex offenders to ever plague modern society. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the horrifying life of Ian Watkins. Ian David Carslake Watkins was born on the 30th of July 1977 in the town of Merthyr Tydfil, just north of Cardiff in Wales. His father passed away when Watkins was only 5 years old, and his mother Elaine remarried church minister John Davies, and Watkins was raised by the pair. Watkins' childhood, by all accounts, was a happy one, and he excelled academically, attending Hawthorne High School in Pontypridd and later going on to achieve a degree in graphic design from the University of Wales, Newport. It was here where he would meet and befriend future Lostprophets bandmates Mike Lewis and Lee Gaze. The three of them had a shared interest in music and had all grown up listening to a variety of mostly American punk rock bands, and in the early 1990s the three of them went on to form their first band, Aftermath, a thrash rock band which didn't record any material and performed only 2 shows in its 2-year existence. Watkins at this time had made music his entire identity. Still in his mid-teens, he had grand dreams of becoming a rock star and would boldly brag to his friends and family how one day he would be selling out stadiums and having #1 selling albums. He continued participating in a variety of different musical projects throughout the early and mid-1990s, before the Lostprophets was formed in 1997 by Watkins and Gaze. Initially, Watkins had intended to play drums with Lee Gaze on lead guitar, but when they couldn't locate a singer, they recruited Mike Chiplin on drums, and Watkins moved over to frontman and lead singer. Mike Lewis later joined them on bass, but eventually moved over to rhythm guitar, with Stuart Richardson coming in as the bassist. The Lostprophets initially started off playing just local venues in South Wales, before joining the full UK touring circuit, mostly as a supporting act to more established bands. Their big break, so to speak, would come in 1999 when they were signed to independent record label Visible Noise, who went on to produce their first album, The Fake Sound of Progress, in the short space of only 2 weeks, releasing it in November of 2000. The band then signed a big recording deal with Columbia Records the following year in 2001, and The Fake Sound of Progress was remastered by famed producer Michael Barberio and released to the American markets. Surprisingly, the lead single, Shinobi vs. Dragon Ninja, gained strong traction on the American Billboard's modern rock chart, peaking at 33, and the album would chart in the top 40 in both the US and the UK, and later go on to achieve platinum certification by the BPI. Despite this, however, the band have expressed disappointment with the album as a whole, and the critics would mostly agree, with the album being received to only moderate acclaim. The potential for the Lostprophets was absolutely there though. The band had built up a strong live following, and they initiated a North American tour in late 2001, mostly as a support act again to more established, this time mostly American acts such as Linkin Park and Deftones, but they did also perform some of their own shows and further established a foothold in the American market, which is no easy feat for a British band. Throughout 2002, Watkins and the band extensively toured the UK, co-headlining the Deconstruction Tour in London, as well as appearing at both the Glastonbury and Leeds and Reading festivals. Watkins throughout this period is being described as driven, organised, and well connected with the other members of the band. By all accounts, appeared to be a man destined for fame, success, and a long career in the music industry. As the early noughties rolled on, the Lostprophets began to grow in popularity. By the time their second album, Start Something, hit shelves in 2004 to very strong commercial and critical success, they had transformed from a relatively niche band from Wales to a group receiving international recognition and praise. They would once again embark on a North American tour, further boosting their status and image in the region, which would ultimately lead to their most successful spell as a band. Watkins during this time grew in influence, and his performances on stage were more eccentric and with more presence, and he seemed more outgoing and sarcastic in interviews. The band would go on to produce 3 more albums: Liberation Transmission in 2006, The Betrayed in 2010, and Weapons in 2012. All to strong commercial success. Now, during Watkins's and the band's early years, they had strongly maintained a drug-free and clean-cut image, but following their second album release, Start Something, and the North American tour which had succeeded it, Watkins had begun to dabble with Class A drugs, and initially this hadn't been something that had a major impact on the band, and they remained productive. But as time went on, Watkins's use of drugs became more frequent, and he became increasingly distant from his bandmates, and this began to take a toll on their relationship and hinder their growth, as Ian became less reliable and less inclined to turn up to rehearsals or even live shows. Not wanting to cast aside their frontman, however, the band staged multiple interventions to try and push Watkins back onto a clean and stable path. Bandmate Stuart Richardson once recounted an incident during 2009 where they realised Ian's drug problem was completely out of control, and Richardson stepped in, stating to Ian, "Look, if you don't clean up your act, you're fucking out. This band is done." And this initially seemed to have a positive impact, as by 2012, Watkins seemed to be on a better path, and when the band embarked on their Warp Tour in North America, Watkins seemed to be in good spirits, healthy, and singing at his best. However, this period of grace would be short-lived, as during the Warp Tour, Watkins would inform the band that he would be meeting with a friend prior to one of their shows. They didn't initially see this as a concern, as the friend in question was someone that they trusted, would have Watkins's best intentions at heart. However, things would take a turn when they realised that Watkins had lied and instead went off with a different girl to embark on a drugs binge. Knowing what we know now, you could only imagine what he got up to. When it came around to performing the show, Watkins was nowhere to be seen, and when he finally returned the missed calls from his bandmates, he stated that he was several hours away from the venue, despite them being expected on stage within the hour. Not wanting to let down the fans, however, bandmate Jamie Oliver stepped into his shoes to cover as the frontman, but the situation had left the other members of the band furious with Watkins. Richardson recalled, "I came off the stage fucking livid. Go on the bus, Ian's on the bus, and I'm like, nice one, and he gives me some shit. And I black the fuck out, and I'm laying punches into his face. I'm not fucking proud of it, but I'm laying punches into his face for 10 seconds or 10 minutes. I don't know. I'm a big boy compared to him, so I'm not proud of this. Then he gives me this fucking look after I hit him. I had this kind of monster energy in my hand, and I smashed this fucking can into his head, and I'm like, fuck. I go outside and puke. And for the next 3 weeks, he's like black eyes and cut on the face, and I'm feeling fucking horrible about the whole thing. And that's what I did when he missed a show." The band would never fully reconcile their friendship with Watkins after this incident, though they did play further shows together, and Watkins' drug use only continued to get worse from here, despite his attempts at trying to hide it from the rest of the band. Unbeknownst to the rest of the Lostprophets at the time, however, Watkins was hiding a far darker and more sinister secret outside of his drug use, as he had been systematically engaged in sexual activity with underage fans, and in some cases even their babies, for years by this point. When Watkins' sexual abuse of minors began isn't entirely clear. Throughout the 2000s, he toured extensively around the world with the Lostprophets, and he was noted by multiple people for often being in the company of young girls when backstage, before and after shows. Music journalist Gavin Allen, who had interviewed Watkins multiple times during his time with the Lostprophets, has stated that there was a notable change in Watkins' personality and demeanour from around 2007. He told BBC in 2013, "By the end of the touring schedule, Watkins was staying in separate hotels and travelling in separate cars to the rest of the band. In hindsight, it looks like he was hiding his behaviour." Allen went on to describe how connected and in tune Watkins seemed after interviewing them back in 2003, after their second album, Start Something, had been released. "Watkins was someone with a very good sense of humour, very personable," Allen recalled. "He struck me as a good guy and someone I could get on with. There was nothing suspicious, nothing at all that would make me suspect there was anything lurking in the background. I think he had a dark sense of humour, certainly, but so do lots of people." Allen went on to describe how this encounter contrasted greatly with an interview he conducted in 2007, when Watkins turned up separately from the band and also late. "There had definitely been a separation within the band," Allen stated. "When I interviewed the group, they turned up early without Watkins, and we started the interview without him. He only arrived about halfway through the interview, and there was definite tension there. It struck me then that there was a difference." This change in behaviour coincides with an incident which occurred in March 2007, where Watkins met an underage 16-year-old fan after a concert. The child was said to have confessed to Watkins that she was a virgin, and this prospect excited Ian greatly. He went on to dress the girl up in a schoolgirl outfit and video record her performing numerous sex acts upon himself. At the end of the encounter, Watkins was said to have urinated on the girl's face and instructed her to drink it. Watkins' behaviour only worsened and grew more sinister as time went on. The situation was made worse by the fact that the authorities had been notified numerous times of Ian's disturbing behaviour and failed to act upon it. Most notably, these reports would come from Joanne Majazelix, a former girlfriend of Ian's who had made multiple calls to the police from as early as 2008, but initially to no avail. Joanne had met Ian back in 2006. She had emailed the official Lostprophets email about tickets to one of their concerts and was surprised to receive a personal response from Watkins directly. The two would eventually grow close and developed a sexual relationship, and Joanne became infatuated with Watkins. However, the relationship eventually went sour after Ian began to express his desires to sexually abuse minors, and when he began boasting of participating in such acts, Joanne reported him to the police. However, the police chose not to take any action, suspecting that Joanne was nothing more than a malicious ex-girlfriend, despite the fact she had numerous text messages directly from Watkins highlighting his clear intent, with one message reportedly stating, "Wishlist, rape a 12-year-old, fuck 2 underage twins." Interestingly, Joanne wasn't the only one speaking out about Watkins at this time. At least a year prior to his arrest, there were users posting on message boards online highlighting Watkins' disturbing interest in babies, with one user writing, "Boys or girls, Ian pays his sluts to let him fuck their kids. He even takes pics and vids of these kids." And another user wrote, "The stuff about him messing with kids is true too. Anyone he goes with who has kids, he's either done stuff to them or tried to. It happened to a friend, but he scared her into not doing anything about it because of other illegal things that they'd done together." These posts seemingly went undiscovered or weren't taken seriously until they were picked up by Wills Online many years after Ian's conviction. Watkins would finally be arrested in June of 2012, but not for the reasons you might think. He was initially arrested on drugs charges after bragging to friends about regularly smuggling Class A drugs from California back to the UK. He was bailed a short time later and horrifyingly went on to commit some of his most despicable crimes whilst on police bail, which we'll go over in detail later in the video. Watkins would find himself in handcuffs again on the 4th of November 2012 after the police discovered an indecent image of a child on one of his devices. He would go on to perform his final show with the Lostprophets on 12th of November 2012 while still on police bail. By December, however, the game was finally up. Watkins was arrested for the third time on the 17th of December on another drug charge initially, and then on the 19th of December he was charged with a string of child sex abuse cases alongside 2 co-conspirators. These co-conspirators would turn out to be 2 young female Lostprophets fans with infant children, and the crimes that Watkins and these young mothers had committed against their children would send shockwaves around the world. Initially, Watkins pleaded not guilty on all counts, whereas the co-conspirators both pleaded guilty. A trial was scheduled for November 2013 and expected to last around a month. However, on the 26th of November, Watkins changed his plea to guilty on all counts except for the rape charge, and this was accepted by the prosecution. At the sentencing hearing, many of the details surrounding Ian's horrific behaviour finally came to light. The incidents I'm about to go over are directly taken from the sentencing report, though I have redacted and reworded many elements in order to keep this video suitable for YouTube. If you are interested in reading the full report, however, you can find it on Google. I should also note here that Ian's co-conspirators have never been named and are referred to in court documents as simply B and P. Their anonymity was granted via court order to protect their children's identities, who are both victims of sexual assault. The sentencing report highlights a clear pattern in Watkins' behaviour, and it clearly demonstrates how his sick fantasies grew more sinister over time. In 2008, Watkins taped a 16-year-old girl performing a sex act on himself, and within the content, the girl is also seen to be snorting a white powder believed to be cocaine and provided to her by Watkins. In late 2011, Watkins met a 19-year-old girl at one of his shows, who I will be referring to as B for the remainder of this video. Watkins and B remained in contact throughout 2012, and the communications quickly grew sexual and then further escalated to discussions around abuse that the pair were planning to inflict upon B's 10-month-old baby boy. The two first met up at the Copthorne Hotel in Cardiff sometime in early 2012, but it is not known exactly what had occurred during this visit. However, following on from the encounter, Watkins sent a message to B stating, "Come down this weekend and we can fuck him up again," which suggests that they had already abused the infant by this point. The mother replied, "Tell me if you want to get your dick in our boy." They would also discuss getting the infant high on crystal meth, a highly addictive and volatile Class A substance. On the 2nd of April 2012, Watkins and B would meet up again, this time at the K West Hotel in London. Watkins would film the encounter and he would attempt to rape the baby as B encouraged him. B would then perform a sex act on her own child before forcing the child to perform a sex act on her. Both were said to be taking enjoyment from the situation and encouraging one another further. Following on from this incident, both Watkins and B remained in close contact and would eagerly discuss future meetings where they could abuse the infant further. Unfortunately, these meetings would actually take place, and Watkins and B would meet again, this time at the Maldron Hotel in Cardiff, though details of this encounter have never been specified or remain unknown. In August 2012, Watkins initiated contact with another young mother by the age of 23, who I will be referring to as P for the remainder of this video. The communications between the pair immediately turned sexual and heavily focused on P's young infant daughter. Watkins said in a text message, "If you belong to me, so does your baby." P responded, "Understandable, a mother-daughter slave duo worshipping you." Watkins replied, "That's all she will know, a life of filth." P then said, "The good thing about babies is put anything near their mouths and they start sucking it." The pair would go on to enthusiastically discuss the prospects of getting the infant high on drugs or forcing her to have sex with animals, and in another instance, Watkins would refer to the infant as "my little fuck toy." Watkins and P would escalate their engagements to Skype video calls, with Watkins directing P as she committed abusive acts on her baby as Watkins watched on masturbating. Unfortunately, these acts would escalate further to physical meetings, and Watkins and P would meet on two separate occasions that is known, once at the Travel Lodge in Caerphilly on the 2nd of October 2012, and again at the Radisson in Cardiff on the 23rd of October. It is not known exactly what took place during these visits, as no recordings of the incidents were found. Due to lack of evidence, both Watkins and P could only be charged with attempted rape. I feel it is very likely that they took things further. It's worth noting here that Watkins was on bail when these incidents occurred, which I feel speaks volumes to the man's complete arrogance. Addressing Watkins during the sentencing, the judge remarked, "I am satisfied that you are a deeply corrupting influence, you are highly manipulative, you are a sexual predator, you are dangerous. The public, and in particular young females and children, need protection from you." He would be sentenced to 29 years in prison, with parole eligible from 2031. We now know that he would never thankfully see this date. For Watkins' co-conspirators, B would receive a sentence of 14 years and P a sentence of 19 years. Due to both girls pleading guilty at the first opportunity, they are eligible for release after serving half of their sentences. Though it's not officially confirmed, both are believed to now be released and remain on licence.
This investigation has uncovered the most shocking and harrowing child abuse evidence I have ever seen. There is no doubt in my mind that Ian Watkins has exploited his celebrity status in order to abuse young children. Today's outcome ensures that 3 people responsible have been brought to justice. The safeguarding of children has been the primary objective for this investigation, and the outcome of this investigation has been achieved through a multi-agency approach at an international level. 2 very young children have been removed from this abuse and given a future that would otherwise have been denied them.
Following on from the sentencing hearing, Watkins was immediately remanded back into custody, where he had been for the previous year awaiting trial, but this time he'd find himself in the infamous HMP Wakefield, often referred to as the Monster Mansion, for the high number of high-risk sex offenders and murderers which are held there. Watkins' barrister, Sally O'Neill QC, would put out a statement that Watkins claimed to have no memory of the attempted rapes of the baby, which were captured on video, due to him being off his head on drugs. She said he couldn't believe he had done it until he was confronted with reality. However, during Watkins' time in prison awaiting trial, he made a prison phone call to a girlfriend where he described his crimes as quote-unquote mega lols, a phrase which had actually been popularised online by the Lostprophets during their heyday. When the girlfriend replied suggesting that referring to his crimes as such wouldn't land well with the public, Watkins reportedly said, "No, I guess it's just lols now," highlighting that he held no remorse for his victims or actions and was effectively treating the whole situation as just a joke. His barrister would suggest that these comments were nothing more than bravado. Watkins would appeal the sentence and he retained Sally O'Neill QC as his legal counsel. She would argue that while his offences were very serious, the 29-year prison sentence was excessive and his crimes were quote-unquote not the worst thing that can happen. Thankfully, the judge disagreed and stated the offences were of shocking depravity and upheld the full custodial sentence of 29 years plus 6 years on extended licence. I think it is also worth mentioning that despite Watkins' crimes being public knowledge by this stage, he still maintained a strong following of female fans who would regularly write to him and speak to him on the prison phones. To me, these women are equally as disgraceful and heinous as Watkins is himself, and I feel it is a disservice to the public and the welfare of children that these women have not been identified and named publicly. A prison officer once noted that Ian would receive regular visits from a group of quote-unquote goth girl groupies, and on at least one occasion he was able to get physically intimate with one of these girls during a visit. How this occurred, I'm not entirely sure, but he was said to have been able to kiss the girl at some point. Watkins would also maintain contact with female fans using a mobile phone which he had acquired whilst in custody. In one instance in 2014, he attempted to reach out to an ex-girlfriend who hadn't seen or spoken to Watkins in almost a decade. She initially doubted that it was him until he provided proof, at which point she reported him to the authorities, leading to the mobile phone being discovered by the prison officers and Watkins receiving an additional 10 months onto his sentence. Ian Watkins' time in prison was thankfully not a pleasant one. An ex-inmate who was in the Monster Mansion alongside Watkins told the Daily Mail Watkins was effectively a dead man walking from the moment he arrived in Wakefield. He had been attacked before and was abused every day. He was a loner, self-centered and remorseless. He had no real friends and spent a lot of time on his own in his room. Allegedly, Watkins was forced to pay for protection whilst inside, and due to his high-profile status and the depravity of his crimes, this protection came at a premium price. Despite this, however, the quote-unquote protectors rarely intervened in any altercations that Watkins found himself in, leaving him an easy target for other inmates to exploit. He would continue his drug use inside prison, effectively taking whichever substances he could get his hands on, and these drugs would also come at a premium cost. cost. In one instance, Watkins had left a drug debt unpaid, and when confronted, he refused to pay up, as he was allegedly out of his mind on drugs at the time. This led to a situation on the morning of August 5th, 2023, where Watkins was taken hostage by 4 other inmates and allegedly stabbed in the neck during the encounter. After a period of 6 hours, he was eventually freed by the prison officers and made a full recovery, though he would state in a letter to a fan that as a result of the attack, he now had bleeds on his brain and permanent spinal nerve damage. Just over 2 years later, in October 2025, Watkins' time in prison and his time on this earth would finally be up, as on the morning of the 11th of October 2025, he was murdered by 2 other inmates.
Singer Ian Watkins, who was jailed for child sex offences, has been killed in an attack in prison.
The ex-Lostprophets frontman was ambushed and knifed after inmates were unlocked from their cells this morning. Police and medics raced to HMP Wakefield and the shamed singer was airlifted to hospital. But Watkins, 48, who was serving 35 years for a string of child sex offences, including the attempted rape of a baby, was hit in the jugular and could not be saved. A source said Watkins was killed in the most brutal way possible, and the attack was shocking.
Violence in prisons is, of course, very commonplace, but an attack like this that it resulted in a murder, in a death, is actually incredibly rare. But we understand this is not the first time he's been attacked. He was stabbed back in 2023, not fatally, and clearly that has changed this time, where we understand, according to sources, that a knife was used in this attack this morning. Now, we have got a statement from West Yorkshire Police who say at 9:39 a.m. this morning, police were called by staff at HMP Wakefield reporting an assault on a prisoner. Emergency services attended and the man was pronounced dead at the scene a short time later. Detectives from the Homicide and Major Inquiry Team are investigating and inquiries remain ongoing at the scene. Now, we understand that the prison went into a lockdown immediately after this attack. Now, it was 2013 that Ian Watkins, the former Lostprophets singer, was sentenced for a string of child sex offences, 13 offences, including the attempted rape of a baby. So he certainly would have been a high-profile prisoner, partly because of his fame. He was the lead singer in the Welsh band Lostprophets, which sold millions of albums around the world, but he also would have been vulnerable to being targeted because of the horrific crimes that he committed, and paedophiles are very vulnerable to being attacked in prison. But this attack happened just 2 weeks after a report from His Majesty's Chief Inspector for Prisons. Their representatives came and visited HMP Wakefield in the summer, and they have concluded that there's been a significant rise in violence at the prison. They said a 62% rise in violent incidents and a 72% increase in serious assault since their last inspection in 2022, with some inmates unable to leave their cells. So you get a sense there that there has been a significant increase in violent crime, violent assaults at HMP Wakefield. And unsurprisingly, Ian Watkins, who was sentenced back in 2013 for a string of sexual offences against children, would have been very much a target for any other inmates in the prison.
2 prisoners have been charged with murdering Lostprophets pedo Ian Watkins in a jail attack. Rashid Giddel, who is 25, and Samuel Dodsworth, 43 years old, are both serving time at HMP Wakefield in West Yorkshire. They are due to appear at Leeds Magistrates Court today, accused of murder.